There was a time when David Reynolds was known for his laughter. At family barbecues, he was the one manning the grill, flipping burgers with one hand and telling silly jokes with the other. He used to lift Emma onto his shoulders to watch fireworks. Neighbors would wave when he passed by. The big guy with the big heart. Life wasn't perfect, but it felt manageable, purposeful. He was the kind of dad who packed his daughter's lunch with handwritten notes. The kind of husband who danced with his wife in the kitchen when no one was watching. But over the years, something quietly changed, not overnight, but inch by inch, choice by choice, until David was just a shadow in his own home. It started with a funeral. David's father, his hero, his example of strength, died unexpectedly of a heart attack. At the wake, David stood quietly, holding Emma's hand, barely speaking. After everyone left, he stayed behind alone, staring at the closed casket. That night, he didn't eat dinner with the family. He sat in the car instead, in the driveway, eating fast food in silence with tears on his cheeks. And that silence kept growing. Grief didn't scream. It whispered. It told him to stay home, to skip the gym, to treat himself more often. And David listened. One skipped workout turned into 2. One burger became 3. Slowly, the kitchen became his hiding place. The fridge light was the only one on at 2 a.m. His daughter, Emma, would knock on the door in the evening and say, "Dad, want to ride bikes?" But David would glance at the stairs, sigh and lie. "Maybe tomorrow, sweetheart." Tomorrow rarely came. At work, he became the quiet one. In meetings, he contributed less, laughed less. Colleagues stopped inviting him out. Clothes got tighter. Joints ached more. Chairs became uncomfortable. Flights became humiliating. The worst part, he didn't recognize it as depression. To him, he was just tired, busy, a little heavier, nothing serious. His wife noticed it first. She begged him to talk. "You don't look at me the same anymore," she said one night, crying at the kitchen table. "I miss the man you used to be." David wanted to answer. He really did. But what could he say? That he felt ashamed of himself? That the man she missed was buried under 200 pounds of regret? Instead, he stayed silent. He walked away from the table, straight to the pantry. Another snack, another excuse, another night alone on the couch. And then came the breaking point. That ordinary night, he was just trying to pick up cereal and milk. Emma was dancing in the aisle, her little shoes lighting up as she giggled. David smiled. For a second, he felt okay. But then the room tilted. His chest tightened. A cold sweat broke down his back. He tried to reach for the shelf to steady himself, but his knees buckled. The sound of cereal boxes crashing echoed around the aisle as he collapsed. People screamed. A store clerk called 911. Emma's voice cut through the noise. "Daddy? Daddy?" Her little hand shook his arm, but David couldn't respond. The fluorescent lights above him blurred and faded as he drifted away. At the hospital, chaos turned to dread. Monitors beeped erratically. The medical team spoke in code: morbid obesity, cardiac episode, DNR protocol initiated. David could barely lift his head, but he heard the word resuscitate. And for the first time in years, he felt true fear. Not fear of dying, but fear of leaving his daughter behind with nothing but memories of a broken man. He pulled his phone from the tray with shaking fingers, opened the camera, looked into it. For a moment, his eyes saw everything. The birthday parties he missed, the games he never played, the laughter he had forgotten how to give. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Emma, I love you. I'm so sorry. Daddy tried his best." And then he hit send. But David didn't die. He woke up groggy, tubes in his arms, the sound of machines keeping time with his breath. For a second, he wasn't sure if it was a hospital or something else. But then the pain in his chest reminded him he was still here. And maybe that meant something. David opened his eyes slowly. The beeping of machines anchored him to the present. The sterile scent of antiseptic heavy in the air. The room was quiet, save for the gentle hum of life support. A nurse walked in, checked the monitors, and without looking at him said softly, "You're lucky. It could have been so much worse." That phrase echoed in his head like a bell. Lucky. He didn't feel lucky. He felt unfinished. As the nurse walked away, David stared at the ceiling tiles. Cold, repetitive, lifeless, just like how he'd been living. He blinked slowly and whispered to himself, "What am I still doing here?" He didn't have the answer yet, but something inside him stirred. 2 days later, Emma came to visit. She stood in the doorway, nervous. Her backpack was too big for her small shoulders. Her eyes scanned the tubes, the wires, the pale skin of her father. She hesitated, then stepped forward. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She simply climbed onto the chair, reached for his hand, and held it with the careful strength of a child who had grown up too quickly. She looked up at him with tear-glossed eyes and whispered, "Don't leave again, Daddy. Please." That was it. That was the answer. In that moment, something inside David snapped back into place. Not fully healed, but no longer broken. She didn't need a perfect father. She just needed him present. The next morning, he asked the nurse to help him stand. She looked at him, surprised. "Are you sure?" He nodded. She brought a walker. He gripped it with trembling hands. His legs trembled too. His feet felt like concrete. Every joint screamed. Sweat poured down his face before he even moved an inch. But he stood, and that alone was victory. He took 10 steps down the hall that day. The next day, 20. The next, 50. A physical therapist gave him encouragement. A fellow patient gave him a knowing smile. But the real motivation came from the picture of Emma taped beside his bed, a crayon drawing that read, "I love you, Dad." When he got home weeks later, the first thing he did was clean out the kitchen. Every cookie, bag of chips, frozen pizza, gone. He stood over the trash bin, heart pounding, hands shaking but determined. Then he took a deep breath and filled the fridge with things he barely recognized. Greens, vegetables, lean proteins. Things he'd avoided for years. He started boiling chicken, steaming vegetables. At first, it tasted like cardboard. His body craved salt, grease, sugar. But he kept going. He drank water, lots of it, walked daily, logged every step and meal with clumsy determination. Some nights, he sat at the table long after Emma had gone to bed, staring at the empty plate. He cried, not out of hunger, but from the weight of years, guilt, shame, missed birthdays, silence between kisses, laughter lost in noise. One night, as he pushed away his plate, he whispered to himself, "Food was never the enemy. I was just using it to fight pain." Things were going well, but then came the fall, about a month in, after a tense call with his ex-wife about shared custody. David drove around aimlessly. He didn't realize where he was until the neon sign of a fast food place glowed through his windshield. He pulled in, ordered everything he used to love, burgers, fries, ice cream. His hands trembled as he held the bag. He took one bite, then another. Memories flooded in, the taste, the comfort, the silence. And then he stopped. He looked at himself in the mirror of the rear view, saw the tired eyes, the sorrow, the regret. He screamed, not out loud, but inside. A primal, furious scream at the version of himself he refused to return to. He rolled down the window and tossed the entire bag into a nearby trash can. Then he drove home in silence, walked straight to the treadmill, and cried as he walked under the dim light of his living room. "No," he said quietly. "Not today. Not anymore." And from that day forward, he never looked back. Weeks melted into months. But they didn't pass quietly. Every single day was a battle, not against the scale, but against the thoughts in David's own head. In the beginning, he celebrated small victories. Losing 5 pounds felt like a mountain moved. But right after the moment of joy came doubt. Will it last? Some days, the cravings were louder than logic. The smell of fresh bread at the bakery, the sound of Emma crunching chips in the next room, the memory of how good it felt to numb everything with food. He'd pace the kitchen at night, hands clenched, staring into the fridge, whispering to himself, "You're not that man anymore. Step away." There were arguments at home too. His body was shrinking, but his patience wasn't growing fast enough. Mood swings came out of nowhere. He was irritable, tired, frustrated that the world kept moving like nothing had changed, while he fought to stay afloat every minute. One night, after snapping at Emma over something small, a spilled glass of juice, she ran to her room crying. David sat on the couch, holding his face in his hands, his heart breaking. I'm supposed to be getting better, not becoming a worse version of myself. That was the part no one warned him about. Losing weight wasn't just physical. It stripped you bare of your old identity, your comforts, your lies. And when that layer came off, the pain underneath was raw. The man he thought he wanted to become wasn't just thinner. He had to be stronger, kinder, more present. Still, he kept going. He made mistakes, missed workouts, overate on bad days, but he always came back. That was the difference now. And the scale, like a quiet witness, kept showing progress. 50 pounds. 70, 100. His back stopped aching. His sleep became deeper. He no longer gasped at the top of the stairs. His reflection slowly changed, not just in shape, but in expression. There was hope in his eyes again. One morning, during their usual walk around the block, Emma looked up at him, her hair bouncing with each step. "Daddy," she said, "you don't breathe so heavy anymore." David smiled and ruffled her hair. "I'm getting lighter," he said, "so I can carry you again soon." Emma giggled and said, "Then hurry up." That moment burned into his heart like fire. He kept going. Rain or shine, holiday or not, he moved. He ate with intention. He learned to cook things he never thought he'd enjoy. He started sleeping with less guilt, waking up with more clarity. The number on the scale dropped again. 300, then 250, then 200. By this point, co-workers were noticing. Neighbors were stopping him on the street. But he didn't care about the compliments. He cared that he could climb stairs without pain, that he could tie his own shoes without gasping, that he could walk into his daughter's school play and sit in a chair without praying it wouldn't collapse. One night, while searching for an old document, he opened a drawer he hadn't touched in months. There it was, his old phone, the one from the hospital. He picked it up slowly, hands trembling, as if holding a piece of a past life. He turned it on. The battery still worked. The screen lit up, and there, in the gallery, was a video, his goodbye. He watched the entire thing in silence. The man on the screen had swollen eyes, labored breathing, and a voice laced with surrender. David sat on the edge of his bed, the phone resting in his palm. He didn't cry this time. He simply whispered, "That man is gone," and pressed delete. "I'm still here." Eventually, David would go on to lose over 308 pounds. At a national wellness conference, he stood on stage in front of hundreds. He wore a suit that fit, not just his body, but his new identity. He didn't speak about calorie counts or diet plans or meal prep tips. He spoke about something deeper. "The heaviest thing I ever carried," he said into the microphone, "wasn't on my waist, it was in my heart. The belief that I didn't matter anymore, that no one would care if I disappeared. And I was wrong." From the front row, Emma, now a little taller, a little bolder, stood on her chair, clapping with all her might. Then she ran to him, up the steps of the stage, and wrapped her arms around him with a hug, so fierce it pulled every tear from every eye in the audience. David didn't need the applause. He just held his daughter, the same girl he once thought he was saying goodbye to, now clinging to a man who had come back, not just alive, but reborn. And if you're still breathing, then it's not too late. You can rewrite your story, just like David did.